Hey there. The purpose of this video is to go over Booleans. Previously, we covered the read eval print loop, operators, variables, and two of the core data types, numbers and strings. A Boolean is another data type. These kinds of values can either be true or false. So head to your browser. Remember that you can open up the console by special clicking and selecting Inspect. There are two primary Boolean values that you can work with. First, true, and then false. So these Boolean values are evaluated and printed back. Now, real quick, you may be curious why these are called Booleans, and this is because a man named George Boole invented this concept back in the 1800s. He was a mathematician and created Boolean logic for the purpose of algebra. Now, Booleans are a fundamental part of programming because they allow you to do conditional logic. Let's explore conditional logic in JavaScript. But for starters, we're going to need to find a larger platform to write our code. It takes multiple lines to write conditional logic, and this console is best for exploring things one line at a time. Technically, you can write multiple lines here, but it's a bit clunky since you have to do Shift-Enter if you want to do so. So as an alternative, let's use an online read eval print loop program. Head to github.com/15dcats/jsbootcamp. This is the official course repository. So go ahead and keep track of it. I recommend that. That way you have it as a resource for you throughout the course. And the part for this video is if you go to the README section, there's going to be this blank JavaScript replit template. Go ahead and click on the link, and in a new tab or window, you should find an interface where you have a file editor on the left and then a console on the right. So this is going to be very similar to the console in the browser, except in here it's way easier to write multiple lines. So the point of opening Replit was to explore conditional logic, and let's start by setting up a variable called foo and set it to the number 10. Notice that at the end of this line, I'm placing a semicolon. Semicolons in JavaScript are used to separate statements. After this video, we'll explore the question of when you should use semicolons and what statements are. But for now, let's continue to focus on the topic of conditional logic. You can use the double equals operator to check whether or not one value is equal to another. For example, let's check that foo is equal to 10 using that double equals operator. Go ahead and run this. Click that giant run button, and the output that you get is true. Nice. For the sake of completion, let's check that foo is equal to something other than 10. So the output before was true, but now it's false. Excellent. So as you can see, the double equals operator evaluates equality and returns a Boolean. With this Boolean, we can now construct conditional logic. To achieve this, the primary tool is the if statement. The if statement allows you to control branches of code that should run based on whether or not a condition is true. For example, we can wrap this within a condition. We'll say if foo is equal to 10, well, let's have a branch of code within a pair of curly braces. And then within that pair of curly braces, let's execute the function console.log. And the log will be the string hello. Note that this is the first use of a function. Functions are one of the fundamental pieces to JavaScript, and later there's going to be a whole section on functions. For now, as a brief definition, a function is a procedure to execute some functionality. When you call a function, you ask it to perform a task. So functions can be used to calculate and return values. But in this case, the function is going to print hello to this console over here. So let's go ahead and run this, and we certainly get a hello within the console. So foo is equal to 10 is true. Since it was true, we get that hello going within the logs. There's also this print of undefined. Where's that coming from? Well, recall that this is a read eval print loop application. It's always going to print the value of the last executed expression. In this case, that would be the console.log function. But the console.log actually doesn't return anything, so its return value is undefined. Therefore, the REPL evaluates the console.log, gets back undefined, and prints that out as the evaluation of the final expression. Now, the undefined keyword as well is another large topic, so there's going to be a video to explore that in more detail. Let's see what happens if the if condition is false. Let's check if foo is equal to 13. If you run, this time the log of hello does not occur. Therefore, the block of code after the if condition does not execute. However, there are times when you want a block of code to run when the condition is false. In this case, you use the else clause. So attach the else clause after the first block of code marked by these pair of curly braces, then provide a second block with another pair of curly braces after the else statement. In this case, let's have it do a console.log of goodbye. And go ahead and run this time. And great, you find that goodbye is logged. The else case is executed because the condition here is false. So now we've given the program control. Based on a condition, it can either execute one block of code or another. This kind of control is really at the heart of programming itself. Programs are essentially giant collections of conditions. In the program, there will be complex data structures present. But in the end, the purpose of a program is the same, really, despite the language you're using. It's to reach an end goal, based on executing statements as determined by various conditions. All right, moving on, we can make this if statement a little more complex by adding another else condition. For the final else condition, we can mix in an else if statement. So let's go ahead and place this else on its own line, and here we have an else if statement. And in this case, let's check if foo is still equal to 10. Cool, and then we'll have another block of code, and to make it all nice and concise, that is how the indentation will look. And in this case, let's do a console.log of greetings. All right. So if you run this, you'll find that greetings is logged. The original variable is 10, so the else if clause is the one that evaluates to true. Therefore, its block of code gets to execute. Now, you can add as many of these else if statements as you like, but at some point, it gets a little verbose to use if, and else statements. So as an alternative, you can use the switch statement. The switch statement allows you to execute blocks of code in various cases. So let's add a switch of foo. So add the foo variable within an argument to the switch statement. And then we set up various cases based on the value of foo. For example, we can have a case when foo is 13. In this case, let's do a console.log of foo is 13. We can have a case for when foo is 10. So we'll do a console.log of foo is 10. So far, these cases match the if statements above. There's the if statement for when it's 13 and the one for when it's 10. But we also have to match the behavior of the else statement. So the way to do that in a switch statement is to use the default keyword. So this is the default case if none of the cases before apply. Over here, we'll console.log foo is something else. Go ahead and run this and try and predict what you're going to see in the logs. Now, if you run this, the switch statement definitely evaluates. You get that foo is 10, and you also see that foo is something else. So foo is only 10, why did we get the default statement as well? Well, working with the switch statement is a bit tricky due to how JavaScript and actually most programming languages work. JavaScript executes all the statements in a block of code marked by these curly braces until you tell it to stop. So in this instance, we have a block of code here for the entire switch statement. If we took out the keyword over here and the cases, you'd find that everything within this block would execute. So here's the block of code within the pair of curly braces. And if you run, well, you see foo is 13, 10, and something else. But with a switch statement, it jumps to the relevant location within this block of code. So it jumps to the case 10, executes the console.log of foo is 10. And then it moves on and still does the rest of the block of code, which includes console.log foo is something else. So to prevent this, you need to add break statements at the end of every case. At the end of case 13, let's add a break statement. At the end of case 10, add a break statement as well. You don't need a break statement for the default case though, because it's the last part of the block. So there's no need to worry about JavaScript executing any remaining statements. So go ahead and run that with the break statements in between, and nice. This time only the log of foo is 10 occurs. Again, I'll reemphasize that conditions are at the heart of coding. Programs are essentially giant decision trees. Based on conditions, you go down branches of possibility to reach various end results. All right, next let's cover some syntax questions based on the code we've written so far. One thing that can get confusing is knowing when or when not to use a semicolon. For example, there's semicolons after these console.logs and the breaks, but there's not one after the curly braces for the else statements or the switch. So let's go over that next.